I always have such good intentions about how class is going to go, and then the internet works against me. So yesterday was Tuesday, the 18th, and we had class, and a couple of you tried to log into the live stream, and the internet just wasn't working. So I'm going to re-record what I taught yesterday so that you all have access to it. So thank you for watching this. And hopefully we'll have internet on Thursday. It sounds like we will. Okay. Go ahead. You share my screen. Oh. I have to add the captions. Okay, here we go. So the first thing that we talked about was rhetoric, and that's what we're going to start with for you guys. Okay, so these are the questions that you need to answer during the presentation. These are the same questions that are the part of the Canvas assignment. If you go to module 3 in Canvas, you'll see assignment, what is rhetoric? And these are the 8 questions for that assignment. So we're going to answer them throughout the presentation. So pause me, write them down so that you can answer them as we're talking. Okay, so rhetoric began with the ancient Greeks. If you are familiar with philosophers were like the very first thinkers in recorded history. So they're the ones who brought us science and math and literature and just the idea of questioning and thinking. They're the ones who created the parameters of critical thinking and language. But not only did they bring us languages, but they started to study how language is used to influence people. So rhetoric is often contributed to Aristotle. He was a famous philosopher. And rhetoric is the study of language, of written language, of spoken language, of visual language. It studies how language is used in society, how language constructs meaning and identities, how it coordinates behavior, power, change, and creates knowledge. Rhetoric is language that's used to persuade people, to motivate people, to inform people. So in this class, you'll be doing the 3 main purposes of writing, which is informative writing, persuasive writing, and expressive writing, which is expressive is like a narrative to tell a story, okay? All of these are writing that is used to persuade, inform, and motivate others. Rhetoric is important because it's the framework, it's the foundation that is critical thinking. It demonstrates your thought process as a writer, and it illustrates your argument strengths. So rhetoric is really important, and that's why we talk about it. Here we have the rhetorical triangle. So in rhetoric, Aristotle broke it down into 3 main parts: ethos, logos, and pathos. Ethos is your credibility as a writer. It's where you establish why you are trustworthy and why we should believe you. And you do this with choosing topics that you actually know a lot about, and letting the reader know why you are an expert or almost an expert on the subject. And you also include sources and cite them correctly so that you are establishing trustworthiness by bringing in experts. Logos is the logic, the reason. Those are the facts, the statistics, the scientific evidence that you'll use to back up your opinions. And pathos is the emotional impact and personal connection your writing has on your readers. You can use, ethos is something that you would establish kind of in your introduction right away, your trustworthiness. Logos and pathos, you can sprinkle it in. And you never want to use too much emotion, but pathos definitely has a time and a place, and it's used quite often with people who understand and value rhetoric. So see the triangle in action, okay? So let's say that somebody has to give a speech in class, okay? The speaker knows the audience likes small talk, but the speaker wants to avoid it. The audience wants to make small talk with the speaker. The audience interprets curt messages as a sign that the speaker is in a bad mood and doesn't want small talk. The shortness of the message communicates the speaker doesn't want small talk. The message being short and curt will make the speaker appear a certain way. Speaker wants to avoid small talk, so makes message a short, curt greeting, and therefore the audience is already prejudging them. Okay, so how you speak, how you write, all infers a type of judgment that others will have, right? If you are speaking to someone who's using proper grammar, then you will value their opinion and respect them more than someone who's just dropping the F-bomb every other word. You might feel more comfortable with that person depending on your on how you feel about that, but you also probably wouldn't consider them to be very intelligent. Just depends. No offense to anyone. Okay. So as you, the writer, when you're writing, you take on a persona, which means mask. Persona is not a negative term. It's the character you want your readers to perceive, how you want to be perceived. Do you want to be perceived as unintelligent and uninformed? Probably not. You probably want to be perceived as being informed and intelligent, especially in your writing. So this is achieved when you take into account your purpose. So am I writing expressively to tell a story? Am I writing to inform my audience? Am I writing to persuade my audience? And then keeping in mind who your audience is, what they already know, and what you need to educate them on. Rhetoric is not a bad thing. It gets a bad rap mainly because of politicians. Politicians have definitely learned how to manipulate rhetoric. It's not necessarily something that blocks or hides an essential truth. It's not a lying politician. Rhetoric, again, is the study of how language, in this case writing, influences other people. So if you understand that language is essential to influencing others, you can use that in OneNote. You can use that to do good or to do evil. So, rhetoric consists of diction, syntax, figurative language, organization, structure, and style. Diction is your word choice. Now, if you keep in mind, why is word choice so important when you're writing? Well, it you hold on, I couldn't show this in the class. I couldn't show this in the class. Let me pause real quick. I can show you guys because we actually have internet. Here we go. Oh, actually, if we share screen, oops, share sound. Here we go.
Very tired. He is exhausted. And don't use very sad. Use, come on, Mr. Overstreet, you twerp.
Morose?
Exactly, morose. Now, language was developed for one endeavor, and that is, Mr. Anderson, come on, are you a man or an amoeba? Mr. Perry.
To communicate.
No, to woo women. Today we're going to be talking about... What is poetry?
Oh.
That page has been ripped out, sir.
Well, borrow somebody else's book. A man is not very tired. He is exhausted. And don't use very sad. Use, come on, Mr. Overstreet, you twerp.
Morose?
Exactly, morose. Now.
Okay. Share my screen again. Okay, all of that was to show you that Robin Williams is saying, don't use sad, use morose, because word choice means something. And in this case, it was to woo women. But in your case as writers, if you so choose to do that, by all means. But for this class, the words you use to communicate in your essays will establish the tone and seriousness of how you're taking your topic. My video panel. Nope, didn't want to do that. There we go. Okay. Sorry about all that. So syntax is the sentence structure, the patterns of your sentences. I'm not going to make you break down what the sentence is, but sentence structure does matter when you are writing, and how you choose to write. So we will talk about active and passive voice and the basic grammar so that you are at least aware. Also, figurative versus literal language. So literal means something that is absolutely fundamentally true. And people misuse the word literal all the time. Like I'm literally dying right now. Should I call 911? Figurative is to use hyperbole, to use language in a way that is an exaggeration, like the stars twinkle like diamonds. Okay. Or in this picture, you have a woman that says, I'm 6 feet tall. That's literal. Figurative language is, I'm as tall as a skyscraper. Make sense? How you organize and structure your essay also matters. Every essay that you write will have a certain structure, and I will definitely go over that with you. Rhetoric is the art of finding and analyzing all the choice involving language that a writer might make in a situation so that the text becomes meaningful, purposeful, and effective for readers. Remember, when we talked about effective communication, you all said that to write effectively means to communicate clearly. And that is what you are doing. Context also matters. and how it will affect the decisions about how your readers feel about your writing. Oh, sorry. Okay, so the traditional categories of rhetoric: invention, arrangement, style, memory, delivery. Invention is how writers generate their ideas. So we will be doing that in the planning, the pre-write stage, the outlining, when you're outlining your essay. The organization, which is the arrangement that will lead to an effective text. Again, every, like, an argument essay has a specific organization arrangement, a cause and effect essay has a specific arrangement, and we'll talk about all of these as we get to those essays. Style is the choice writers make with sentences and words. It's the artful expression of ideas. What memory is when you tap into cultural memory. And in the classroom, we used 9/11, 2001 as an example, because a lot of the people in the class weren't alive during that time or were very young. But yet they know the story of 9/11, 2001 as if it was their own, because they've heard it so many times, because it's a cultural memory now. I was thinking about I was talking about my mom with this, because for her, she wasn't alive during the bombing of Pearl Harbor, but she heard about it so much that to this day, it still is an important date to her, because it was important to her parents. So she heard about it a lot, and it became a cultural memory. So what devices will you as the writer use to help your audience remember certain important points in your text? Delivery is how you get this information to your audience. So how something is written, how something is said. Okay, here again is that chart that I showed you when it comes to ethos, pathos, and logos. If you want to pause and look at this to give you a clearer picture of what those three mean, by all means, please do. To understand rhetoric, you need to understand the persona. We've already talked about that. Making sure that you establish yourself as educated, considerate, trustworthy, and well-intentioned. Understand how to appeal to the logic, to the ethics, and to the emotions of your readers. Understand the subject matter. Make sure you know what you're talking about. Understand the context, the time, the place, the people, the events, the motivating forces behind the piece. All of that will impact your writing. And the intent. What is your purpose for writing this? Why are you writing it? I never want to hear, I'm writing it because I was told I had to write an essay. You're going to have a weak paper if that's your intent. Your intent needs to be informative. It needs to be expressive. It needs to be persuasive, depending on the essay prompt. And then making sure that your writing is appropriate for the situation, formal versus casual, etc. So here are some flowery language used to describe rhetoric by famous philosophers and writers that you are welcome to pause and read if you'd like. Okay, so here we are back to the question. So what is rhetoric? What is rhetoric? Rhetoric, remember, is the meaning of rhetoric is the study of language, of written, spoken, and non-verbal language, and how it impacts society. How do rhetorical skills relate to an individual's life? In this case, how will understanding logos, ethos, pathos, and how language is used to influence society, how can you relate that to your life? Where do we see rhetoric in the media? And I seem to remember in class people said, we see rhetoric in music, in television shows, in movies, in news programs. Very much used to influence people. Advertisements. What rhetorical skills will you need in this class? Well, you will need the ability to integrate pathos, logos, and ethos into your essays to make them effective. What is a writer's task involving rhetoric? Understanding its influence on readers. Who uses rhetoric? We all use rhetoric. Why do people use rhetoric? To communicate effectively. And how does rhetoric affect people? Rhetoric affects people by influencing their actions, their thought processes, especially when it comes to critical thinking, whether or not they are using critical thinking skills. Remember, rhetoric is the foundation of critical thinking. You can say that, rhetoric is the foundation of critical thinking. That certainly affects people. Okay, so you do need to type up your answers, and that can, and then the assignments, let me go through Canvas. Canvas modules. Right here, assignment rhetoric. Click here. You are going to, you can read through this, which I recommend. You can, then please watch this video. The lecture video, the lecture PowerPoint that I used is right here. And then here's those 8 questions. So you're just going to copy the questions and then hit the submit assignment button that's at the top of your screen, and you'll get a text box. Just paste it in there and type up your answers and then hit submit. Okay. All right, so that's rhetoric. Now we're going to talk about the second part of class, which was critical thinking. Go back. We didn't make it very far, and we're going to finish this on Thursday, but I'm going to go ahead and get you to the point where we were at. Okay. So critical thinking, we're going back, remember, rhetoric was the foundation of critical thinking. So now let's talk about what is critical thinking. We go back to Aristotle. Aristotle said, it is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. That is what critical thinking is. It's for you to hear information, consider it, and then decide whether or not you should accept it based upon facts, logic, and scientific evidence. So these are the questions that you need to answer throughout this presentation. You can go ahead and pause and write those down, and then we will answer them. So pause me and write those down. Okay. What is critical thinking? Critical thinking is actively questioning everything that you see, hear, and read to come to thoughtful conclusions about it. It's not simply accepting something as fact just because Uncle Joe said it was true, okay? Be successful, you need to be a critical thinker. Everyday use of critical thinking is making judgments about what to buy or not to buy based on product labels and advertising. So if you take a look at this photo, what do you see? Clear, pristine water. This water, Aquafina water, is pure water with a perfect taste. It clearly comes from snow-capped, ice-capped mountains where apparently palm trees are also somehow growing. And you have a woman who's swimming in this clear water, so clear you can see her. Okay. For some reason we have a fisherman and ice cubes. Okay. So just absolutely just the purest water you could drink. Now, if you actually read the label, you will actually come to find out that Aquafina is owned by Coca-Cola, which is based in Atlanta, Georgia, and that their water is just it's just recycled, purified water that includes a lot of chemicals and then different additives to get rid of the taste. So it's not pure. It's not coming from snow-capped mountains. It's ran through a lot of chemicals to clean it, and then you drink that. So they're lying. So in this second ad, you have an advertisement for bottled water that says 98% melted ice caps, 2% polar bear tears. If bottled water companies can lie, we can too. And so they want you to go to tappening.com to learn more about why bottled water companies are evil, essentially. So what do these both have in common besides water? What are they both doing? What are they trying to do besides, well, Tappening's not really trying to sell you anything. They're trying to inform you. So what are they trying to do to the buyer here? They both have manipulation in common. Okay. They're manipulating you. They're lying to you. So at least this one's admitting they're lying. So it's that's why without critical thinking skills, if you didn't stop to read the label, if you didn't stop to question why there's ice-capped mountains and palm trees in the same place, and that you just accepted that Aquafina must be pure water because it says it is, then that's a lack of critical thinking, and you're very easy to manipulate. So that's what advertisers are always banking on, a lack of critical thinking skills. It's why they often target young people, because the human brain doesn't develop fully until roughly about the age of 25. That's when your common sense tends to kick in. This is an average age. And it's really easy to target teenagers and especially 18-year-olds who just became adults, getting them to get credit cards so that, because they often lack critical thinking skills. So the 4 basics of critical thinking is to be alert to assumptions made by you and others. Don't assume things. Question those assumptions. Why do I feel this way? Why do I believe this? Consider and connect various points of view, even those different from your own. And be careful with that, because you do want to consider different viewpoints, but you want to make sure that you are considering different viewpoints that are coming from logical, scientifically based backgrounds and not crazy. And then finally, don't rush to conclusions, but instead remain patient with yourself and others, and always keep an open mind. So here is an assumption that I encountered a lot living overseas. People living overseas would think Americans eat fast food. Fast food is bad for you, therefore all Americans are unhealthy and fat. It absolutely blew their mind when they would meet me and find out I'm a vegetarian. That just did not fit into their assumptions about Americans. And so to just accept assumptions, to accept stereotypes as fact, denotes a lack of critical thinking. You can pause this if you want, but these are the 9 traits of critical thinking. But really what I want you to remember is that you need to explore and analyze. Make sure you examine whatever the topic is, the question, ask additional questions, reflect, and then collaborate and come to your own conclusion. These are all ways that you can become a strong critical thinker. There are different stages of critical thinking. An unreflective thinker at the very bottom is somebody who doesn't think at all. This might be, somebody said in class, you could probably think of this as a child, right? They're very dependent upon their caretakers to do the thinking for them. A challenged thinker might be somebody who, that's about the time when, you're starting to get to a toddler stage where they're starting to figure things out. Beginner thinker is somebody who is accepting, has the ability to think for themselves, but still accepts what other people say is true. These people tend to be in cults. Practicing thinker is somebody who is always who will think about something, question it. An advanced thinker will think about it, question it, and come to their own conclusion and analysis and bring in additional questions. A master thinker, I don't know who these people are. They must be absolutely brilliant human beings. I don't know. Maybe philosophers maybe, but I would say that I'm somewhere between a practicing and an advanced thinker. And I think that there's always room for an improvement. So don't think, oh, I'm a master thinker. I'm yet to meet one of those. So then we talked about stereotypes and how they are often rooted in assumptions that lack critical thinking. So these stereotypes are offensive. That's kind of the point of a stereotype. The first one here, making the sweeping generalization that all Asians are good at math. This makes Asians very mad, by the way. Or that somebody brought up in class that some people say that all Asians are bad drivers, right? That's another stereotype. People from the Middle East are dangerous. Okay, this comes, well, all the way to the 1970s, but obviously in a post 9/11 world, and then ISIS and Al-Qaeda, you have all of these different extremist terrorist groups that you only have a few that are making the whole look bad, right? That would be, honestly, that would be like if everybody judged Americans based on the terrible people that stormed the Capitol on January 6th. Then it would, if that like, oh, all Americans are crazy and they like try to overthrow their government, same thing. It's an unfair stereotype to judge an entire group of people based upon the actions of a few. All Hispanics in America are illegals. Okay, a lot, that's another assumption or stereotype that is often applied to people from Mexico, and it's also not true. Americans are rich and lead comfortable lives. This is another stereotype that many people overseas believe. America is the best country in the world. This is probably one of the worst stereotypes I've ever heard. And all of these are dangerous in their own unique ways. And we talked about that in class. The last one is dangerous because you'll have people coming from different countries totally expecting America to be this beautiful El Dorado where their lives will be so much simpler and easy. And yet they get here and they come to find out that they have to work just as hard as they did in their own countries. And now they don't speak the language, they don't know the culture. So it just became even harder for them. All of these can potentially be harmful. I don't believe that there's a single stereotype that isn't harmful. Okay, so this is where we ended class on Tuesday. So I'm going to stop here, and then we will pick up the rest of the presentation tomorrow on Thursday in class. Okay. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that this helped, and I hope that you have a lovely day, and hopefully the internet works on Thursday so that we don't have to keep doing this. Take care.